In the real world, very few items have a super sharp edge like what we're seeing on this box and what we see a lot of times on 3D models. What we want to do is we want to mimic reality and kind of round off the edge, but a lot of times you don't need to go as far as using tools like rounder and router and have multiple faces. Sometimes you just need one little face, enough to catch light. And that's where the bevel tool comes into play. It's the most commonly used modeling function, and all it does is it extrudes away from the original face, but it doesn't leave any extra geometry like the original face. It doesn't leave that behind like the extrude tool. And it also allows us to do a little more tweaking to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this surface, I'm going to go into texture mode just so that we can see the light hitting it when I apply a small little bevel. Okay, so as I rotate this around, I now have a new face for light to catch. Makes it a lot more interesting than these other edges. Okay, so what I thought we could do is take a look at the bevel tool and see what's going on with the tool and some uses for it and some ways to avoid some gotchas on it. So let's go ahead and I'm going to undo that. And I used the bevel tool interactively in the viewport, but what I'm going to do now is open up I'm going to come over to multiply, bevel. I hit B on the keyboard in order to use it. That's the shortcut key. And remember, to find the shortcut keys in the buttons, just look right on the button and you can see what the shortcut key is. I'm going to hit N for numeric, or I could come down here to the bottom menu where it says numeric, and I'm going to reset the tool. So we're back to default. Okay, so by default, nothing's happened yet. We're in the bevel tool. It just looks like our polygon selected. And I'm going to go to texture wire just so that we can see the wireframe on this. Okay, so the first option that we have is to shift. And what shift does, I'm going to use the mini slider. It shifts the selected polygon away from its original location, and it's building these extra faces along the side. Okay, but there's not a polygon underneath here as if we were to use extrude, the extrude tool. So this is shift. So you get to determine how far away do you want that face to be. In a micro bevel, in a tiny little bevel, you barely push it away, but depending on what you're building will depend on how far away you want to shift it. Okay, we're going to skip this little plus and minus here for right now, and we're going to skip to the next most important function of the bevel tool, which is the inset. And inset determines how much do you want to shrink or scale the original polygon in, which of course looks like it's tapering here. Okay, so we can inset and shift with the bevel tool. It's all one function of the bevel tool. Okay, so we're gonna put this to use here in a second, but let's just take another look. You can create a new surface. So if I come over to new surface and let's just say we'll call it logo. Okay, see, I'm giving the new faces a new surface. That's if you want to. So if you don't want to go back and later select that geometry to give it a new surface, you can do it as you're building it, and that's the new surface function. So we can see this also helps us see what is being created. This isn't being recreated, it was already there. It's just these 4 new polygons right here that are being created. Okay, and we'll get to the inner and outer edges. We'll get to that in just here in a second. So now that we know that bevel is for shifting and insetting of faces, and know that each face will be treated separately, it's not going to do it as one big group. We have other tools like multi-shift and smooth shift and extender plus that do that. But for bevel, each face will be independent, and we'll be seeing that as well. So now that we have a basic understanding of the bevel tool, I'm going to come over to this little LightWave logo that isn't very impressive. It's got these hard edges, not really all that exciting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the front faces and only the front faces, and I'm just going to kind of position this so we can see it. I'm going to hit B for bevel, N for numeric. Now it remembers the last settings we were using, and these settings are not really working for this. So I'm going to reset, and I'm going to shift away from the geometry a little bit, and I'm going to inset a little bit, and maybe not shift away so much. I'm going to do one of those little tiny little bevels on this. Okay, and so now you can see the light catching that edge, and it looks much nicer. It's much much more impressive in my opinion. Okay, so I'm going to undo because I'm going to show you a gotcha that you might run into. I'm going to grab this G, copy, paste it to a new layer. Okay, let's go to texture wire. I'm going to grab this face, B for bevel, N for numeric, and I'm going to inset it more. I want a nice big bevel here, and I'm going to shift it some more. Okay, I'm running into a problem with my geometry. I'm insetting so much. Let's do it interactively. Okay, that looks fine, but then I'm insetting so much it starts to overlap the points. Okay, now what a lot of people do is they just go, oh well, I'll back it up and I won't inset it so much. But what if the look you're going for requires the inset? So we need to learn how to clean this up. So I'm going to go ahead and commit. And then I'm going to use all 4 of my windows because what I really want is to get over here to the front view in wireframe and see that this point is overlapping. So with Control T, the drag tool, I'm just going to stop that from overlapping. Okay. Over here. Now these, I got a lot of points that surpass this now. So what I can do, just another option, instead of moving these points, I'm just going to weld them to that point. Okay, and we'll see how that holds up, but let's take a look. That looks fine, that looks fine. So our only real problem area was right there. So let's see what this looks like. There we go. Problem fixed. So this one we just moved the point so that it wasn't overlapping, and the other one we welded points. So when you have points converging on themselves, so you have them, shrinking in because of the inset, sometimes it requires you to weld or move points so that they're not overlapping. Now there's another way to go about it. Let's take another letter. Let's say let's say the W, because the W is another face. Let's just copy and paste. This time I just grabbed the front face. Okay, I'm going to bevel this. Okay, see how it starts to overlap here? Well, we do have an option. Let's go to N for numeric. Instead of beveling inner, we can do outer, and it bevels away from the polygon. So instead of beveling in, it's beveling out. And so sometimes we work backwards to get the bevel that we want. So if we wanted to bevel this and not have any cleanup, use outer and then do your extrude from here back. Okay, and so this is what the inner and outer allows us to do. The inner bevels in, and we've got all this. Now we could clean that up, just drag those points, and we're set. But if we want to, we can just work the other way, have the smaller face already built, build the bevel out, and then build from there, and that'll work as well. So now we know what the inner and outer is all about. We know what the shift and inset is all about in the new surface. We need to figure out what this plus and minus is. We also learned a couple ways of cleaning up that geometry. But what I'm going to do is just grab a flat plane with the arrow keys. I'm going to give it some segments. Okay, let's turn texture wire on. I'm going to move it up just a little bit so we can get a good look. Okay, so with the bevel tool, B for bevel, I'm going to bevel. Oops, I still got out selected, so let me do inner. Okay, see how each face is being beveled independent of the other? So that's what the bevel tool is always going to do. There's no group function on this bevel tool. There's other tools that allow you to do that, like multi-shift and extender plus and smooth shift. So what the plus and minus allow me to do is, let me go with 400 millimeters for the shift, and let me do 100 for the inset. Now, what the plus and minus will do is, if I say let's do 10, actually I'm going to say 50. Let's go higher with this one. I'm going to do 200. Okay. So what's happening is it's saying use the shift of 400 millimeters, but randomly add or subtract 200 millimeters. So we get these random shifts. And you could do the same thing with inset. Be careful with inset because remember you don't want to overlap the polys. So I'm just going to say 10. Okay. So not only do we have random, and I can increase that a little bit. See how it's randomly in real time we're getting to kind of see it randomly go. Okay, so I've randomly inset and shifted. So it's saying inset 100 millimeters plus or minus 77 millimeters. Okay, so now we have a pretty good idea of what the tools do. Let's take a look at how they work interactively. So I'm going to go ahead and commit to that. We've got a neat little cityscape of sorts, or just some Nernies and Greebles to throw onto some kind of ship. I'm going to go and draw a box out, get rid of all these segments. Okay, just draw something like this, center it. Okay, and I'm going to add some segments. So I'm going to use the knife tool, add a couple segments. And if you don't want to use the knife tool and you want to add segments while you build, well, we already know we can create that box. It remembers my last settings, and before I've created it, I can go up with the arrow key, right with the arrow key. I've added segments. Okay, I'm going to shrink that in a little bit. F2 to center. And now what I'm going to do is turn symmetry on so that I can bevel on one side and it will bevel the other side. So let's just build just a real rough shape of a character, and we'll use the bevel tool to do it. So I'm going to kind of zoom out. I'm going to select these faces, and without using the numeric window, I'm just going to hit B for bevel, and I'm going to drag for, oh, I got that random going. We've got to go back to the numeric, so I lied. We are going to use we're going to reset. The plus and minus was kind of randomizing the bevel. So if I move my cursor from left to right, I'm insetting, and up and down is shifting. Okay, so I can quickly do multiple bevels or one bevel just by left clicking and dragging to set my shape, and if I right click I commit. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go to full screen, and I'm going to make the upper thigh, the lower thigh, the upper knee, the lower knee, the upper calf, the lower calf, the upper foot, and the lower foot. Okay, so I got little legs. I'm going to expand my selection and stretch out the feet a little bit. Okay, and that's not looking too much like a character. It's kind of blocky, but if I hit the tab key, I can turn on sub patches, and I can tuck in some of these points and pull out the belly a little bit, stick in the back some, pull out the butt some. Okay, and I can start working with these points. Okay, but let's focus a little more on the bevel tool. So I'm going to grab the polygon right here, B for bevel. I'm going to make the neck, then I'm going to bevel the head, rotate that head up, come over to the arms. Remember, I'm in symmetry mode, so I only have to work on one side. And I can bevel, 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 and then of course I could eventually build hands and things like that. I can adjust all this, but the idea is with the box tool and the bevel tool, I've already got the start of a character now. It's actually this, but with sub patches we can be here. But we can see that quickly we can add geometry to our object just with the quick bevel. So remember, I'm going to just create a box real fast, get rid of those segments, turn symmetry off, center it. If I select one polygon and use B for bevel, I can, left and right is going to inset, up and down is going to shift. Okay. If I right click, I've just committed, and I can start a new bevel. Right click, okay. So I can do multiple bevels without having to keep dropping the tool and using it again. Hit N for numeric. I can always shift, which is shifting, which is moving the polygon away from its original location. I can inset, which scales it in. Okay. I can randomize on when I have multiple bevels selected, or sorry, multiple polygons selected. I can randomize the plus and the minus with the plus and the minus for randomizing the shift and the inset. I can create a new surface on the beveled polygons while I work, and I can work with the edges beveling in or out depending on what I'm working with. And I found that I rarely use the out unless I'm working on logos. If I'm working on 3D logos, it comes in handy all the time for certain letters that just don't play nice with bevel because they've got so many points in a really tight corner. Okay, so that's a quick look at the bevel tool. I'm sure that you'll end up using it. It's the most commonly used modeling function, and it can really help improve the quality of your model by adding those little micro bevels and adding those faces that are going to catch light.